A very good morning to one and all present. Sustainability Reporting Standard Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India welcomes you all to the webinar on Sustainability Reporting, Emerging Issues and Insights. Globally, momentum is increasing towards establishing a multi-stakeholder approach for increasing the coherence of initiatives within the sustainability reporting landscape for ultimately boosting transparency, corporate performance, and supporting usage of non-financial information in the investment process. Sustainability reporting enables entities to not only be more transparent about sustainability-related risks and opportunities, but also to communicate information that is relevant for all the stakeholders. On behalf of Sustainability Reporting Standards Board of ICI, I'm extremely delighted to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this webinar. I welcome our expert speakers of today's webinar. Today's webinar is on sustainability reporting, emerging issues and insights. It is a platform to emphasize on the importance of sustainability reporting. It is covering emerging issues in the field of sustainability and is providing new insights and perspectives. We are covering 4 topics in today's webinar. It includes evolving sustainability reporting standards, sustainability and need for business responsibility and sustainability reporting, sustainable development goals and roles of businesses, emerging issues and requirements for sustainability and ESG reporting. Now I'll be welcoming our first speaker, CA Hemant Sabharwalji. He is a partner in a large firm with more than 24 years of rich professional experience working with the corporates. His diverse experience includes sustainability assurance, integrated reporting, business responsibility reporting, and waste management reviews. Sir, we are very happy to welcome you to this webinar, and we would request you to start your deliberation.
Sure. Thanks, Jyoti. Am I audible? So, very good morning to all the participants here and the speakers, and very big thanks to Sustainability Reporting Standards Board team at ICI for inviting me for to speak and to share my views on this subject. So today's topic is sustainability reporting, emerging issues and insights. So what I will be talking about is evolving ESG reporting standards, and more so from a global perspective, because I understand that there are other speakers also talking on local requirements, including the RSR. So I will be talking about more from how the global standards have evolved, including the recent announcements on reporting at COP26. So with that, I think I will kick off my presentation. Next slide, please. So what I'll be covering in my presentation is why ESG reporting matters, how have the global standards evolved over a period of time, and what can we, let's say, expect as we go forward, what has been the global reporting landscape and how standards are converging or merging. Then 3 of the prominent examples of convergence, which is WEF, Value Reporting Foundation, and ISSP. I'll be discussing more in detail. And then in the end, what are the key takeaways from this whole aspect of convergence of standards? Next slide, please. So, as I said, before we get into details on what are the standards, how do we adopt them, which ones to adopt, I think key thing is why ESG reporting matters. So here I would like to say that there are 3 or 4 key things to be kept in mind how or why ESG reporting would benefit a company. First is building trust. I think if a company has a clear and meaningful ESG report, it helps in sort of building the corporate reputation, reinforces its license to operate. The higher the sort of quality of data, processes and controls leading up to reporting, the higher is the sort of confidence level within the company, because I think most of the ESG reports that we see, whether required by regulation or not, are put out in the public domain. So I think the trust factor there is very important. And also the one of the elements related to ESG reporting trust is that companies get their reports assured so that that trust level remains high. Uh, Better, I think, transparency. So stakeholders these days want more and more information from the companies, whether it is customers, whether it is your employees, whether it is your investors, regulators. So I think the more transparent you are in terms of how ESG is impacting your business and what are the ESG risks and opportunities and how you are addressing those, the better it is for the company. And as a, a company goes through an ESG reporting journey, I think it helps the company identify what are the risks and opportunities around the ESG and how do they address them. And finally, overall, just to sum it up, I think it leads to increased value for the company, whether it is trust with stakeholders, whether it is overall, I think in the longer term, cost reduction, more meaningful employee engagement, wider access to markets, sustainable finance, and all. So I think these are some of the areas to be kept in mind from ESG reporting perspective. Next slide, please. So this sort of slide presents broadly a global ESG reporting, how global ESG reporting has evolved, where it started from, what are the standards that came into being, and where we are today. So I think it all probably started from 1992, where the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro was organized, where 178 countries participated, and there was a sort of an agreement to improve human lives and protect the environment. 1997, the first standards on reporting, which is Global Reporting Initiative, was set up, then followed by Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, UN Principles for Responsible Investment, which requires investors to look at ESG aspects before they make investment decisions. IIRC for integrated reporting was set up. Then SASB was set up around 2011. Then between 2015 and 19, the UN body adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. TCFD, Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosures, was set up. And as it was set up, it now has been made mandatory in several countries. And 2021, we saw Value Reporting Foundation, which set up through merger of IIRC and SASB, and recently the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, which is TNFD, also has been set up. So as the global reporting standards have evolved, I think the ESG reporting as a concept has also evolved. So on the right side of the slide, I've tried to indicate how how the ESG reporting has evolved from just an awareness when GRI and first global standards were set up. It was more of an awareness phase for companies. Then it was more of disclosures by management here and there in bits and pieces. Then it moved to a stage where companies look at ESG as a tool or embed ESG into their strategy and operations and have metrics around it to judge their performance. And now I think, if I may say, we are in a stage where a lot of companies, I mean, I would not say all, but a lot of companies globally and even in India do use ESG as a concept for telling their value creation story to investors and the broader stakeholders. Next slide, please. So I Here, I think it's a busy slide, but as you can see, what I've tried to present is the various reporting frameworks, standards, guidelines that are possibly there around you, and probably many more. And this is just to, highlight that there are several frameworks available for companies to adopt. So there are standards and frameworks. Then there could be, there are standards like GRI, SASB. There are frameworks like CDP, TCFD. There are ESG principles and guidelines, and there are several rating platforms or ranking platforms as well. So here, if I just focus on the different standards, I think I won't be talking about each one of them, but some of the key ones which I used, I'll just very quickly touch upon them. So for example, GRI is a standard which is most widely used globally. And this is a standard which requires companies to identify material topics that impact the company and its stakeholders and make disclosures around those. SASB is more sort of US driven. It has topics and metrics for 77 different industries across the three pillars of ESG. IR or IIRC is a integrated reporting framework which helps you tell your value creation story to the outside world, and it helps you focus not only on financial capital but the non-financial capitals as well. CDP focuses on how to measure your risks and opportunities on climate change, deforestation, and water security. And Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD, provides 11 recommendations across 4 pillars: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. So, these are some of the more prominent frameworks which are used by companies in India and globally to report on. And with so many standards or frameworks, the question that crosses one's mind is which framework to use. And it's not a very sort of easy answer. I think it depends on company to company, business to business, as to what are the drivers for reporting, what are the pressures, what is the audience or stakeholders that you're trying to address, what is the data availability level at each organization. So if we talk about drivers, if let's say a company says whatever is compliance driven, we will report on that. So if TCFD is today becoming mandatory in UK, then companies would need to adopt that for sure, if not any other framework. And if a company wants to tell a holistic story on value creation, then they would look at integrated reporting. So I think at different frameworks address different stakeholder groups. So for example, GRI is a more broader framework and looks at all stakeholders, whereas SASB is more investor driven, and IR again is more sort of holistic and looks at all stakeholders, but yes, with a focus on investors. I think next slide, please. Yeah. So I think with the different frameworks in place, there was a pressing need to have a uniform approach and standards across the globe. And so some of the issues, which also one is which standard framework to select, but some of the other issues which emerge because of so many standards and frameworks are that comparability of reporting across different companies and countries. And these days, companies, whether in India or globally, they have operations in more than one country. So how do you compare data across companies and countries? That is a challenge with so many standards. So if one company is reporting under one framework and another company is reporting under another framework, then comparability becomes difficult. And if a company, let's say in Europe, is following the EU directives, and it has a subsidiary in India which is following Indian regulations, how do you bring them together? So that's a big challenge. Other risk is with so many metrics, so many standards available, there is a risk of cherry picking, that companies may uh, uh, may focus on certain topics or report topics which are favorable to them. Lastly, there is a risk of greenwashing, which is companies presenting themselves as, let's say, environment friendly or favoring the society, whereas that may not be the actual case, or let's say window dressing their numbers. So I think with these sort of these issues seen by global standard setters and all, there we've seen activity around cooperation and mergers of different standard setters, and a need and expectation by the larger community for common minimum reporting requirements and a fewer set of standard setters or authorities. So, two or three recent examples of convergence of standards, and I'll touch upon them briefly here and then expand on it as we move along in the presentation. First is World Economic Forum. Now, World Economic Forum launched a framework which has 21 core metrics and disclosures, and 34 expanded metrics. And but this is a framework again which has been devised after keeping existing frameworks in mind. Similarly, IIRC and SASB merged recently to form the Value Reporting Foundation. And more recently at COP26, we've seen the announcement of setting up of the IASSB, or the International Sustainability Standards Board. Next slide, please. So I thought it'll be good to talk about all the three recent examples of convergence and then focus a bit more on the ISSB example. So to start with, now when WEF and IBC came up with this ESG matrix and reporting, there were questions as to whether we are having one more framework now to adopt, with already so many frameworks existing. But I mean, this was not the case. I think the WF, in essence, is an attempt to bring different frameworks together. So the matrix that are defined in WF have been brought about as a result of looking at different frameworks such as GRI, SASB, TCFD, and bringing in frame matrix from those standards to the WF matrix to ensure or to provide a common framework for companies to report on and for stakeholders to compare information between companies. And to come up with this matrix, I think the criteria used by WEF or IBC was that they, as I said, they tried to be consistent with existing frameworks and standards and not come up with something new. And the focus was on materiality, as to what are the material issues for the companies, and also how long-term value creation can be done. The While deciding the matrix, it was also considered what is practical and actionable, and metrics were sort of included and defined accordingly. And I mean, definitely the other objective was that to bring in universality across industries and business models, rather than having something which is more industry specific. And lastly, how, I mean, metrics were devised keeping in mind that there should be some feasibility of reporting as well as monitoring on those metrics. And as I briefly mentioned earlier, there are 21 core and 34 expanded metrics. Core metrics are more for companies as they adopt the WEF, or the companies who are in their initial stages of the maturity of reporting. And expanded matrix is more for the more, I would say, uh, forward-looking or companies who are advanced in their reporting. And also expanded matrix includes not only matrix on the company, but matrix which are downstream for the supply chain and operations as well. Next slide, please. Uh, so then coming to Value Reporting Foundation. Here, the two frameworks which were brought in together were converged were the integrated reporting framework of IIRC. Now, IIRC was founded way back in 2010 to enable integrated thinking within entities and internal management, and helping management to tell their value creation story to stakeholders. And also, I think participants may be aware that SEBI made integrated reporting recommendatory for top 500 listed companies a few years back, and that's when activity around integrated reporting has picked up in India as well. But integrated reporting is a more principles-based framework and does not provide any KPIs. It sort of provides guidance on how you can tell your story to the outside world. Whereas on the other hand, SASB, which was founded around 2011, and as I said initially, more focused on US, has different metrics for different industries. IIRC asks you to do a materiality assessment and arrive at what are the material aspects for the company, whereas SASB has already done that groundwork and looked at material topics for different industries and come up with those metrics. Now, I think the broad thought process of bringing both together was that, that's my view, that IIRC is a more principles-based framework, does not define KPIs, but the overall process, and SASB is more about metrics across industries. So with both coming together, I think there is an opportunity for companies to tell their story in a better manner. And I mean, so if we talk about now with the merged value reporting foundation, there are three key resources. One is the integrated thinking principles on how leading businesses can embed ESG considerations in their strategy and operations. Then we have the integrated reporting framework and the SASB matrix. Next slide, please. Now coming to the very recent announcement at COP26, which was a COP26 at Glasgow, which was a forum where global leaders gathered to discuss climate change impact and climate change issues, and how can as a planet we can look at those issues and address those or mitigate those. So there, the most important announcement around reporting was of the setting up of the International Sustainability Sustainability Standards Board, and here the announcement was on formation of ISB, consolidating the Value Reporting Foundation, which I spoke about earlier, which includes the SASB and IIRC, and the Carbon Disclosure Standard Project, which drives the CDP. And goal was to set up a high quality, understandable, enforceable standards which can be adopted across the globes. And the G7 ministers also backed this momentum and this initiative. And with the announcement, ISB also came up with two prototypes, one for climate related disclosures and other is the general presentation. So I think in the short term, companies, I mean, while there are companies who have already been reporting using different standards and frameworks, and it should help as they transition into ISSB standards. Also in India, it's the same situation, but I think companies in India who have not started their journey, they could start looking at PRSR, which will be mandatory from 2022-23 for top 1,000 listed companies. And so that framework has also been devised, keeping in mind several international frameworks. So that would be a good start for the companies in case and when they adopt ISB standards. Next slide, please. So this is a broad timeline or how the announcement on ISB came into being. And if we see, how this came into being, I mean, and so it was not just a sudden announcement. There was a lot of groundwork or background work done on that. starting with ISCO announcement to work with the IFRS Foundation, then strategic announcement on establishment of IASSB that required sort of changes in the structure of the IFRS Foundation. So there were nominations for the ISB chair and vice chair invited, and that is yet to be announced. And there was support, as I said, from G7 finance ministers and other eminent persons group sort of also endorsed this initiative. Then initially, I think consultation was sought on the changes to the IFRS constitution, and the feedback received was analyzed and post that only the certain structural changes have been brought about, and the announcement on in COP26 has been brought about on ISSB. So moving forward, I think these two prototypes have come out, which have been work undertaken by Technical Readiness Working Group, and we expect that in the first quarter of 2022, the first set of draft standards will come up for comments, and hopefully in the second quarter, these standards would be released. Next slide, please. So this is very broadly on what are the sort of two prototypes that have been released, and I would actually so these standards have been built on. I mean, the proposal here is that all standards that will be developed will be based on the TCFD 4-pillar structure, which talks about governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. And if you see the two prototypes released also, they are based on this 4 pillars only. And when we talk about governance, it means what are the governance processes, controls, procedures a reporting entity uses to monitor sustainability risks and opportunities. Strategy, what are the risks and opportunities that could enhance the entity's business model and strategy. What are the risks identified, assessed, managed, and how are they mitigated? And lastly, what are the metrics and targets around all this sustainability related information? Now, if I come to the first standard, which is a general standard requiring disclosure on information other than climate. So it talks about basically what information to disclose, what is the general approach to disclosures on this against these 4 pillars, that is how to disclose, and sets out what to do if the ISSB standard does not cover a material topic which is sort of impacting the company. The second standard, which is a thematic standard on climate, it sets out the requirement for identification, measurement, and disclosure of climate-related financial information. Objective is to require entities to provide information about their exposure to climate-related risks and opportunities, so that investors and stakeholders can assess financial information through general purpose financial reporting along with this information to take their decisions on investment or association with the company. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and here I've tried to sort of jot down, and I will talk about some of the key takeaways in my view from all this convergence that has been sort of happening. So firstly, I think global standards have set the foundation for comparable and transparent reporting of ESG factors affecting business. And here on this slide, I'm slightly focusing more on the announcement of ISSB and the convergence that has happened. And with this recognized framework, I think good news for investors is that they will have disclosures in a standardized and comparable format, and it will help them in their decision making. The other thing I think is that while it may seem that ISSB is a new standards board, but I think it is come up with the by virtue of consolidation of CDSP and BRF or Value Reporting Foundation, which means that there is not a fresh start. Both organizations are very well established. They have their own framework, standards, metrics, and have been in use for quite some time. And both have their network of investors and companies who are adopting them. So I think it's not a fresh start, but there is a lot of ground already covered by these organizations, which can be leveraged by ISSB. The other question to be asked is that whether this consolidation or convergence we are seeing is enough. I think only time will tell. But if we see some of the most prevalent standards and frameworks, they have merged. But what about GRI, which is still one of the most widely used standards and addresses the need of the broader stakeholders? So that is still operating as a separate standard. Also, EU has its own requirement and reporting directives. SEC in US is looking at coming out with climate related disclosures. So while this consolidation or merger is very welcome, I would say in my view, but at the same time, there is still a lot of ground to be covered, and standard setters would probably need to work further together to reduce or address this issue of alphabet soup of different standards and frameworks. But I think with IISSB being set up as a platform, now there is the standard setters have started thinking about consolidation, and I think further consolidation can be looked at. Also, I think while there is a general standard and climate related disclosures have been covered, we will need to see how social issues also remain important, and we will need to see how when the prototypes are released or when the standards are released, how or whether proper weightage to social issues is also given. Lastly, I think regulators and authorities around the world are quickly looking at how to adopt these standards, and there are some announcements here and there. But I think as we move along, there will be, I think, attempt from different jurisdictions to adopt the ISSP standard and to bring their reporting to a common platform. I think with that, I will I'll stop here and hand over back to Jyoti. Thanks once again to the SRSB for giving me this opportunity to share my views.
Thank you so much, Hemant sir. That these were really wonderful insights on how the sustainability reporting landscape is evolving and how there are many significant changes taking towards a common set of sustainability reporting standards. And a formation of International Sustainability Standard Board is really going to revamp the sustainability landscape. The fragmentation of standards and these issues will be solved in due time. So one question which has come up right now is that how the greenwashing can be avoided by the companies, like how the investors can see that the greenwashing is there.
Sure. Thanks, Jyoti, for the question. It's a very important question. And as reporting has evolved, I mean, earlier, whoever was reporting under whichever standard or whatever data, nobody was questioning. But now, as I think the concept of ESG is gaining importance, there is a lot of questions around greenwashing. So I think there are a couple of ways by which greenwashing can be avoided, and one of the steps is having a common and uniform matrix for companies to report on and for investors and other stakeholders to compare. Second is, I think here assurance plays a very important role, and I think as assurance providers, all of us as chartered accountants, we need to ensure that when we do assurance, we need to ensure that the data that has been presented is correctly presented, and also ensure that companies are not only disclosing information that they want to disclose, but they are addressing all aspects of their business and also covering negative impacts of their business. And it's, I mean, if you see some of the globally evolved reports, they would report continuously on the negative impacts, but at the same time, they report on how they will be addressed. So they don't shy up from owning these aspects. Whereas what I have seen in India, companies not want to report on negative aspects. So I think during assurance as well as on reporting, companies should also ensure that they report on all aspects.
Yeah, the assurance aspect is very important, and that is where role of chartered accountants is very important in this area. So thank you so much, sir. That was really a wonderful session. Now we move on to our next session. After listening to the global developments, we are now moving to our Indian regulatory landscape in the sustainability reporting. The next session is on sustainability and need for business responsibility and sustainability reporting, BRSR. I'm pleased to welcome our speaker, Mr. Darshan Chajarji. He has got a rich international and national professional experience of more than 32 years in the field of assurance services, risk management, tax advisory, technical opinion, financial due diligence, and corporate restructuring. He has worked with professional services firms in many countries, and he is known for his strong analytical skills and in depth knowledge. We welcome you, sir, to this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you so much.
And now I would request you to please share your insights on this topic.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will share my PPT. I hope I am audible and things are visible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Jyoti and SRSB for giving me this opportunity to interact with you all. Himanji I was listening to the last speaker and he was so professionally meticulous, and the way he presented and the thoughts that he brought about were fantastic on the standards and how they are changing. So what I'll be trying to address in next 25 minutes is what is sustainability and the need for BRSR. So like Hemanji and Jyoti, we were talking about greenwashing, So I think one of the tool to address this is BRSR, because we have moved from BRR to BRSR, which is a change in the direction. So I'll first start with the thing on what are the global risks as reported by World Economic Forum. And we can clearly, what I want to demonstrate in this slide is the global risks have actually changed from, from a economic side to an environmental side. So if we see here, the likelihood that have been covered in 2020 are mainly to do with the environmental side, and the impact is also on the environmental side. Whereas in 2010, the impacts were more on the economic side, which were being focused. Now, taking this forward, we have the report on 2021, the Global Economic Forum report. Now, here again, if we see the climate likelihood of the climate impact is pretty high, and the impact, if we see that again, you see biodiversity loss, climate action failure, natural resource crisis, human environmental damage. All these are to do with the environmental change. Of course, there are issues with respect to infectious disease which has come up, and we have all gone through this COVID scenario. Digital power, digital power concentration and digital inequalities are going to become the next challenge, which is going to actually hit the livelihood going forward. So this not being the topic, I am not covering in detail on this. So basically, what I want to focus is that environment is a major issue which needs to be addressed. So when we talk about sustainability, business today operate in an environment plugged with enormous global challenge. There is climate change happening, population is growing, there is a lot of inequality, resource is scarce, and all these issues, they have to be addressed. And the way to address this is becoming sustainable. So what is sustainable? Sustainable. When we are using the resources which are limited, and what are we leaving for the generations to come? This is very, very important. How we use the resource, what we leave for the generations that is to come. If you don't leave enough water or resources for them, then their survival, their existence is going to be a big challenge. So, a lot of businesses, they have, they've taken audacious targets and goals in terms of, what they will do in helping this whole sustainability environment, which again, it is to do with environment, social and governance, ESG, or PPP, people, planet, and prosperity. So, for example, Philips has taken a target to be carbon neutral by 2020, or PNG having zero consumer and manufacturing waste to go to landfill. So these are very good targets. These are some of the things I have taken from their financials of 2019. So 2020 there. So the updated versions will give us more insight into how they are going to go. LG is working very hard on that. Daikin is working to reduce the greenhouse emission. So every company in its own way is working towards addressing these challenges. So, as we all know that there are sustainable development goals which have been the UN convention. These have been accepted, and India is also part of this. India also wants to achieve these 17 goals, and that is how the whole concept of sustainability is taking the front stage, not only from the investor's perspective or from the business perspective, but from the government side. The government is also serious about it. They are looking into these aspects. And so that is what I'm trying to explain here, that what are the challenges? Ultimately, see, it is the big corporate, the small businesses, and even the micro businesses, the public sector undertakings, they all are working towards, they all have to work towards making these policies, guidelines, and rules. So the government, what the government has done is they have come out with the policies and guidelines. So we already have the National Guideline on Responsible Business Conduct, 2018. And how does the government actually accumulate all the data around the environment? Of course, they will do it what the government is doing in the public sector side or in the development side. But the big corporates, ultimately, all these challenges are linked with our businesses, the businesses, the way they operate, and they are actually responsible to ensure that all these environmental issues, social issues are addressed. So the government has come out with the guidelines, and then the businesses have to align their businesses with these guidelines to ensure that as a country, as a nation, and the world at large achieves these goals. See, very recently, the climate change, more than 1.5% temperature degree, 1.5 degree, that is having a major impact. So here it is important that as as a nation, we all work towards it. I was reading in one of these articles that by probably 2030, some of the cities might actually be underwater. The way the water level is rising. We all know about the high temperature Canada has faced, the impact on the Arctic Circle around to do with all these climate change and the way the temperature is rising. These are going to have major impact. So what the government has done is they have come out with the national guidelines on responsible business conduct. Now these guidelines are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. SEBI on its part, to ensure that all these reportings happen, has made it mandatory for top 1,000 listed entities to report on BRSR format from FY 22-23. So what they have done is they have made the board responsible for this, and the objective is basically to build trust and transparency. I think that was very well covered by Mr. Sabharwal in his last presentation. And going forward, what we are seeing is that audit and rating. So it is going to be assurance, and then rating is to do with investors, and the rating agencies have started rating the companies in terms of sustainability. So this is the landscape. Why BRSR? Now we'll come to specifically on BRSR, but before we go to that, I'll just broadly present that National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct has 9 principles. Now, all these 9 principles are linked with the 17 UN SDG goals. So, if you see the center is the principle, and UN SDG goals have put the numbers around. So there are 17 goals, and all have been covered by these 9 principles. So basically, this is the framework on which BRSR reporting has to happen. Going to the BRSR reporting. So there are 3 parts to this reporting. One is section A, B, and C. Now, section A, basic information has to be given, additional disclosure on proximity of operation to environment sensitive sites, like if there is a business which is operating near a forest area. So that what is the impact of that business, or what is the impact of the emission on the wildlife, on the forest. So these are some of the important things which are covered in section A. Section B actually is to do with the policies that the companies have, and the policies and processes relating to NRGB. So how are the company's policies and processes aligned with that of the national guidelines on responsible business conduct? So this is very important. Unless the companies, the corporates, they have their policies in place, they will not be able to demonstrate that they are actually following these guidelines. And the C section is to do with performance against each of these principles. Now, this is very important. See, as of now also, corporates were reporting on responsible business, uh, matlab, responsible business conduct, DRR, they were reporting under that. And some of them were doing integrated reporting. Now, with BRSR coming in, there is a detailed format for disclosure. So, this greenwashing that was being discussed, it will be very difficult for corporates to actually hide relevant information, because the questionnaire which needs to be filled in BRSR is a pretty detailed questionnaire. It is covering all aspects, and it has got the formats, detailed formats. So it will be very difficult for any company to make misreporting. Of course, some element of judgment will always be there, and that is where, as assurance people, we need to help these companies and the investors and the board of directors to ensure that the reporting is correct. And very well said by Mr. Savarwal, that the negative aspects have to come in. And in this format, if you go through the format, various negative aspects will automatically come in when you start answering the detailed questionnaires. So, what I am trying to put here is that in the sustainability space, BRSR is become an important reporting guideline. It will cover various aspects of business conduct. And by doing this, the complete coverage will be there. And BRSR is a reporting in XBRL format. So the government on its part will be able to gather all these data and information from a country perspective, and based on these information, the government can then make policies, show it and demonstrate it to the world at large, how India, as an important member of this whole mission, is playing its role for the world at large. So the C section actually has got two categories. The essential category, which is mandatory for all companies to report, and the second is the leadership. Now, this leadership is the differentiating factor for companies who will actually lead the sustainability object. It is a factor for the companies who will be able to demonstrate that they are leaders in these sections, and that will definitely have a very positive impact on their rating from an investor perspective as well. So just to bring a little clarity on the essential indicators. So these are mandatory in nature and have to be disclosed, will require capturing of data at various levels. Now, see, even for companies, reporting under BRSR will not be easy. I'm saying that it will not be easy. Why? Because as of now, they are not in a framework. They do not have the framework by which they can actually capture the data that is required to be, to be put in the BRSR format. So it is very important that the companies will have to capture the data at the various levels, for which they will need support from various professionals to build that framework, how to capture data. And then once the data is captured, they will have to comprehend that data in an information which is readable and which makes sense. The third thing is disclosing these data. So capturing the data, converting it into readable format, and then disclosing the same. And this is where assurance will play a very vital role. Now, these issues, these essential issues cover integrity. Now, when we talk about trust and transparency, integrity is actually linked with transparency. So the more transparent a company is, the higher degree of integrity it will be able to demonstrate. The second is the social safety aspect of employees and the value chain. So here again, the complete value chain have to be considered by the corporate. See, we will agree that probably the micro businesses and the SMEs may not have that kind of resource and ability to address every aspect or all the 9 principles defined in the national guidelines on responsible business conduct. So it will be the duty of these big corporates to help these value chain down the line to become part of this. So how they will help, what are the measures they will take, will become very important. Similarly, on environment, the focus is on water, energy, pollution at various levels. So water is very, very scarce. Energy, you're already seeing in today's environment, the kind of focus that has come on renewable energy. So with these kind of focus coming in on renewable energy and other things, environment aspect, the companies will have to demonstrate that. So how much coal a company is using to produce energy in whatever way, what is the carbon emission from that? All these aspects will get captured in this BRSR format. Stakeholders, management, and society at large, what is it that they are able to demonstrate by way of their product? For example, PNG is working on a product that will ultimately be reused and there will be no landfill. So, everybody and how that is going to impact the society at large. And then, of course, partnership is a very important factor. Partnership has to be between not only between corporates and the value chain. The partnership between the corporates and the government is an important partnership that will help in addressing these sustainability aspects and advocating good policies at various forums. So this is going to come up slowly, gradually, as corporates demonstrate some good practices, and those practices actually will then come in the form of public policies. And of course, human rights have to be addressed. On the leadership side, I will just say that the corporates have to focus, and to become leaders, they will have to actually work on the culture and vision of the organization. How the organization thinks. It is not a tick box approach that will help in achieving the sustainability goal. BRSR is just one step towards that, but this is this is something that is not the end. So basically, to achieve this leadership position, one has to understand the value of this whole reporting. So there are external benefits of BRSR, and then there are the internal benefits. So if I see that the corporates will actually be making economic sense for them to actually adopt BRSR and the sustainability aspect of it. So, I think the slide is pretty simple, and external benefits like trust and reputation, attracting capital, because now the focus of investors is on sustainable companies, stakeholder engagement, and competitive advantage. This is what the corporates will get. See, every as an investor, I will invest money in a company which has a long-term existence defined. So if I am not a compliant company, then with the change in laws, with the change in situation, my operations cannot go beyond a point. So if I am a long-term visionary, and that is what it is required by the stakeholders and the investors, that is how the value reporting is so important. Of course, internal benefits in terms of vision and strategy, management systems. This is to do with making your system robust, weakness and strength analysis. So where are your weaknesses? What are the points where you are not able to achieve the sustainability objective? And of course, employee motivation will automatically come when the employee sees. So the loyalty of the employee will definitely increase. Of course, there are challenges. The quality of reporting, there are challenges because subject matter is pretty diverse. There is no one structure of reporting, as was said, but now this one structure has been drawn up. We need to see how this structure comes out. Materiality is vague and fluid. So if you say that this is not material, how do you define that materiality in terms of its impact? And a lack of internal oversight, how we are managing varying system of measurement, how am I measuring it? So some standardizations around measurements are also subjective as of now, but slowly I'm sure as we go forward, they will become more objective. And of course, I will not take this because assurance is going to help in various ways. I think I will rest here because the time is also up. So that's all from my side, Jyoti. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. The deliberations were very valuable, and in fact, business responsibility and sustainability reporting is really a very new kind of framework which the Indian companies are adopting. And we all as chartered accountants have an important role in this new format. As you all must be knowing that the Sustainability Reporting Standards Board is running certificate course on BRSR. So now we move on to our next session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Our next session is on sustainable development goals and businesses. SDGs are very important, and they are the genesis of sustainability reporting. So I'm very pleased to welcome our next speaker, CA Payal Agarwal. She is presently working with a large firm as a senior consultant in restructuring and reorganization. She has an experience of 8 years in audit planning, statutory audit, and tax audit. Welcome, CA Payal.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome. And thank you so much, Darshan, for giving us an insight about sustainability and need for business responsibility and sustainability reporting. I'll just share my screen. Let me know when it's. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Payal, it is visible.
Yeah. So the Sustainable Development Goals, as we all know, there are 17 SDG goals, and also they are the global goals, which the world is supposed to achieve. I want to first explain in a very simple language to our audience by 2030. And this is not just limited to India, but every single country is required to achieve their Sustainable Development Goals. And obviously, since India is still in its development journey, we are still getting there. We are required to put double the effort to be able to achieve our SDGs and also accelerate growth and development in the country, and how businesses also play an important role in doing that. So the 17 SDGs, they are integrated, interlinked global goals designed to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. So they recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others because of the ripple effect and interconnectedness of life. Like we cannot be thinking we can continue to harm environment or continue to harm the planet and still ecologically advance as an economy. So sustainable development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, and all countries are aiming to transform the world through SDGs. So I would like to discuss 3 of the SDGs today. And while preparing the webinar, I did watch a few videos, and as a practicing Buddhist, I'm really trying to inculcate sustainable human behavior within my own life. So let me now take the webinar forward by talking individually about few of the goals. Yes. So, the first goal which I want to talk about today is good health and well-being, and ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all ages is important, and to building prosperous societies. So never before did we realize the importance of health so much as we realize it today. And this SDG, aims to achieve universal health coverage that seeks equitable access of healthcare services to all men and women. This pandemic has been hard on everyone around the globe, and we did not ever realize so much of importance of health as much as we did in past 2 years when we were all working from home. So that change in one individual can build a prosperous society. So that human revolution in one person taking those steps toward health can encourage all people around him. So why is health and well-being so important? Especially as professionals, especially as people who are working in corporate, high functioning, dynamically changing environments. And the pandemic has made us really realize the importance of mental health and wellness. Like we could see so many people coming up with various mental health challenges, and when they were confined at home for longer durations of time in these past 2 years also. So we have moved from working from office to probably a hybrid model, to probably remote working, which we had never imagined before. So how can we make provisions to ensure that we are able to support our employees, and as entrepreneurs and the businesses are able to support their employees by actually giving them that listening ear? Because I'm sure when we used to go to office, we used to have our own set of people, our own set of colleagues to discuss any glitches we are facing in every day. And now we are all sometimes left by ourselves to come across and face any challenges. So have like general pillars of support for health and well-being of the employees, and how we can ensure health and well-being at our homes also for other family members, because one person's health affects everybody in the family. So it's important to take breaks while we are working from home, like every continuous span of 30 to 45 minutes, so that we can rest and rejuvenate, incorporate exercise in our daily routine so that work does not get very mundane and boring, and reducing the screen time also, which is very important, which I feel with so many sessions and webinars which we do today, our screen time has drastically increased, from past 2 years. So trying to stay away from phones and laptops during the weekends is something which I personally do. And trying to go for a walk maybe, or incorporate standing and sitting exercises while working on laptops for long hours, in a way ensuring like a 10 to 15-minute physical activity every day, anytime, and trying to spend time with the family also, not to compromise in these things, because that is, this is what makes our well-being so important. And that's where sustainable development goal is, where, we can actually really implement in our life. And on the other hand, so as a business, to support this goal, we can actually contribute philanthropically to give to organizations that are working to support health, to ensure that we have first aid services, medical services at the drop of the hat for our employees. Like in my organization, we have these desks, these groups, so that whenever any employee needs probably blood or anything, is like able to quickly access, and is not, that waiting time is reduced, and really really helps them in those last moments. So especially during emergencies, any of the employee or a team member is facing any medical emergency, the insurance is being available. So businesses can integrate this goal by making all policies and practices relating to the equity, dignity, and well-being of all employees engaged within a business or in its value chain, without any discrimination, and in a way that it promotes diversity as inclusion as part of their theme. And this principle recognizes that well-being of an employee also includes the well-being of his or her family, so that all employees can work joyfully when they have that peace of mind, and they are able to like really devote themselves. So this brings me to my next goal of gender equality. So what is gender equality for us? It is a condition of parity, regardless of an individual's gender. It's when people of all genders have equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. Like, we are not somewhere thinking, okay, if I'm going to hire a woman, she might going to take a long break because of a marriage, or maybe, of an upcoming pregnancy or something like that. We put those barriers aside while we are hiring, while we are giving anybody an opportunity. It's when people of all genders have equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. And it is achieved when women, men, girls, and boys have equal rights, conditions, and the chances and the power to shape their own lives. Like, we actually give them that decision making responsibility there. So I can see it like when I'm working in my team, a lot of times my seniors kind of delegate everything to me, and they don't they give me that sort of an autonomy, that sort of a decision making power to take a stand whenever it is needed. And they actually, we can actually promote gender equality by believing in the potential of all around us, regardless of whether that person can handle the pressure, irrespective of their gender. And it is achieved when women they have the freedom to make choices and decisions and contribute to the development of society as well. So it is a matter of equitable distribution of power, influences, and resources in society. So gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful and prosperous and sustainable world. So because we can see in past 2 decades, in past 3 decades, a lot of women are stepping out. A lot of women are not just homemakers, but they are also running the family. They are also going out and working and exploring as many avenues. The whole system of the gender roles have completely dispersed. It's not that only this person or this gender is supposed to do this task. Everything is becoming more of a life skill. So this goal is something we look at in today's time when we all step out of our houses to work. So all organizations, and especially where I'm working, have made diversity and inclusion at all tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 levels a part of their theme. And we get a lot of mentoring from women coaches at each level, and there are special groups assigned. So ending all discrimination against women and girls is not only a basic human right, but also crucial for sustainable future. It's proven that empowering women and girls helps in economic growth and development, because then they are also able to contribute to the country and to the economy in their own way, and have that place to go to, and feel good about their own personal accomplishments. So today there are more women in public office than ever and before, but encouraging more women leaders will help achieve greater gender equality. So the importance of female leadership, is like, I feel is so important in businesses, is growing with passing time now. So we just don't, it's just not that in that board we will have only men. We can see a lot of women now coming up. The importance of females in different spheres of life, different areas of businesses. For example, my favorite Indra Nooyi, who was an Indian American business executive and former CEO of PepsiCo, leading by example in corporate world. And she used to talk about in her interviews, then when she used to get back home, her mother used to tell her to leave that corporate crown in the garage, and at home she's a mom, she's a daughter-in-law, she's a wife, and she needs to leave that crown in the garage. That was one of my favorite interviews which I remember of her. And then we have leading Kiran Bedi, who was the first woman in India to join the officer ranks of the Indian Police Service IPS, and she was such a social activist too. So she introduced several reforms in Tihar jail. And in sports, we can see Saina Nehwal, an Indian professional badminton player, a former, world number one, and she has almost won over 24 international titles. So I still remember how in one of her interviews, Sudha Murthy, wife of Narayan Murthy, who's an Indian engineering teacher, author, and a social worker, and also the chairperson of the Infosys Foundation, said that she was the only, woman in the BVB College of Engineering and Technology, from where she was only, pursuing her electrical and electronics engineering. And, at that time, this was the field which was only pursued by men, and none of the women had ever stepped into electrical and electronics engineering. And she was the only woman in the entire campus. So she shared that, she was asked to wear a sari every day to campus, and she was not allowed in the college canteen. And it was a very male-dominated college. So as few of the conditions for her to join the engineering college by her teachers there. And she was the first female to be hired at India's largest auto manufacturer, Terco. And she had also written a postcard to the company's chairman that time, complaining of the men-only gender bias at Telco. As a result, was granted a special interview and hired immediately just because she pointed that out. So there needs to be a gender parity, but still in our country, there are several male-dominated places where we need to accelerate women participation. So as to business, how can I ensure maybe to have a set percentage of women who we are promoting every year, to have a set percentage of women leadership every year, to have a set percentage of women leadership, to have equal leadership and role, and to give opportunities and diversify our organization that way, so that all the staff also feels comfortable and they have their own mentors and coaches to go to, just their own super coaches to go to. Give opportunities and really look at maybe appointing a gender champion and holding these conversations on a very regular basis with women and mentoring programs for them at all levels. So towards my own contribution in my organization, if I have to talk about, I feel it really supports me to take ownership, first of all, to take all the accountability for the projects in which I'm able to contribute. And I'm made to feel that I'm no less than my male counterparts. In fact, they keep on encouraging me to take different kinds of work so that I can polish that sort of a skill set. And businesses can integrate this goal by ensuring equal opportunities at the time of recruitment, during employment, and at the time of separation without any discrimination. Businesses should promote and respect the right to freedom of association, participation of workers, and collective bargaining of all employees, including contract and casual labor, and provide access to any sort of grievances and redressal mechanisms. Businesses should create systems and practices to ensure a humane workplace. Most important is what I feel, whereas where our people are comfortable sharing with each other. free from violence and harassment, including sexual harassment, a workplace where employees feel safe and secure, and they're able to contribute with adequate provisions for grievance redressal. So now I want to come to the point as in how SDGs help businesses. So their achievement creates an arena of thriving stakeholders for us on which companies depend on for their success. The SDGs provide all businesses with a new lens through which to translate the world's needs and ambitions into business solutions. The SDGs define the end state for a resilient and sustainable environment and supports a resilient and just society that fosters a resilient and inclusive economy, thereby the overall development of the country, of course. So why the goals should become a part of any business plan? So they can help a company define its aspirational purpose in a way that is relevant and inspiring to stakeholders, allow purpose to become the foundation for its strategy, and ignite long-lasting positive change that may increase shareholder value over the long term, of course. So since businesses, even any entrepreneur who starts out, any firm or company who starts out, they are a very integral part of this integrated society. Therefore, they should hold themselves accountable for the effective adoption, implementation, and the making of disclosures on their performance in regard to how they have integrated SDGs in their mission statement, right? The governance structure should be developed and put in place structures, policies, and procedures. For example, towards SDG 12, that is, responsible consumption and production, I was just going through yesterday, companies should adopt sustainable practices and publish reports, sustainability reports. Economic and social progress over the last century has caused a lot of environmental degradation, as we can see, and that is endangering our ecosystems a lot. Marine life, especially if you see, and the future of the world. One component of the social and economic progress is the increasing and worldwide consumption and production of all the resources for global economy, which includes the use of scarce resources like petrol and fuel, which rely on the use of natural environment and resources in ways that continue to have negative impact on the planet. And that is why we have suddenly become so aware, and there is this need for these goals, and there is this need to achieve them by 2030 by the world overall, because of that sort of an effect on the planet. Businesses should increasingly take responsibility for the safe collection, reuse, and recycling of their products at life, so as to build a circular economy as a part of the notion of extended producer responsibility that is increasingly becoming a part of regulation in India and globally. I strongly resonate with substituting the use of plastic, especially how much it unknowingly gets consumed by animals. Because as per one survey, they said that when they used to, open those animals, they used to find so much of plastic in their belly. The wildlife habitat, as per all the studies, it shows the plastic pollution can afflict land, waterways, and oceans, and how harmful it is for the environment, probably because it is used in every sector to produce, packaging, building and construction, transportation, electrical and electronics, and industrial machinery. And replacing plastic water bottles, maybe, we can do that with glass water bottles or steel water bottles. If we are supposed to mindfully produce and consume, then let's see what it is that each one of us is consuming is very, very important, that we look at our own habits. For businesses, the kind of stuff which is available in our canteens, most importantly, the stuff available at our handout machines, vending machines, we can try to have healthy snacks while working from home, because vegetable waste from fruits and salads is still useful for animals. But the plastic waste of a packet of chips, for example, is harmful. So we can minimize it, as even as we employees don't have much of movement, throughout the day, and we are very immobile during the day. So due to this sort of a sedentary lifestyle, that is where it is very important, trying to probably cook for ourselves, because obviously the freshly cooked is always better, because this pandemic, as I can see somewhere, has increased our habit of ordering food online, and also leads to a lot of ill health and long-term health diseases like diabetes, obesity, which really increased in past 2 years, and lifestyle disorders which we have come across. And how these are some points on which we can improve, how we can I really want to get those inputs from everybody, that how we can all together realize these goals, how we can actually think on those lines in that direction. It can be by planting more trees, around our houses, going all green. I really like the Delhi government's initiative on, planting the trees on the road dividers, and it really beautifies and adds to the green belt as well. Saving the natural resources like water, putting off the tap when we are not using it, reducing the usage of fuel, etc. Trying to not pollute the environment, maintaining the steady balance between technology and our own life, not going overboard with it, probably using jute bags instead of poly bags, using bamboo brush instead of a plastic brush, using eco-friendly pots as planter, using cotton handkerchiefs instead of a tissue to reduce the use of paper, because pehle we used to go massively for printing, but now everybody is becoming more wiser and saving things or saving stuff reports online instead of going for printouts at the drop of the hat. So towards my personal efforts in SDGs, which I have tried to incorporate in my lifestyle, are making those, making health and meditation and a balanced life a priority, promoting a healthy work culture at my workplace where employees can reach out to each other without any inhibitions, hesitations, so that, we can have less mental breakdowns. Nobody feels overwhelmed because of anything due to long working hours. Not leaving anyone behind, most important, not leaving a single life behind, and fostering the spirit of global citizenship amongst all our employees across teams, not wasting water and other energy resources if not in use, like switching off all the lights if not in use. I'm sure we will all try to do that, promoting the initiatives of our own companies and firms where we are working towards these goals. Minimal use of plastic in everyday life, aiming towards peace and unity in my team, where etc. And I continue to enhance my focus on these goals. So I just want to conclude by saying that how we can really make an effort together. If all of us together start to take micro steps so that we can have a bigger impact instead of one person trying to follow everything. So definitely, 1,000 people taking a single step is better than one person taking 1,000 steps. So following every day is difficult, but if we can incorporate the small steps and try and encourage other people in our environment where we are working, our colleagues, our team members, our friends, at our workplaces, to include small steps, that is something will lead to a greater change, mobility overall. There is no better time to do it than now. So let's not put it off for another day. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. I'm very motivated, for my own efforts to inculcate sustainable humanistic behavior in my own routine. And I feel very positive to make, I feel very positive to prepare to make these efforts. And I also researched to be able to prepare for the webinar. It was very eye-opening experience for me, because even though I knew certain things, but deep down, my understanding of a lot of other aspects of these goals, which I myself did not know. And I hope you found this meaningful and you will be able to contribute to the betterment of our planet overall in your own unique way. So hopefully you're all agreeing with me in your minds. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Payal, for a wonderful deliberation. So, in fact, as regarding gender diversity, like I was reading somewhere that in Indian corporates right now, on the boards, we have representation of around 17% women, and in senior management position around 20%. So a lot of things need to be done, and businesses have an important role to play to encourage women to take up leadership roles. So thank you so much, Payal. Now we move on to our next session.
Thank you.
We move on to our next session, which is on emerging issues and requirements for sustainability and ESG reporting. And I'm very pleased to welcome our next speaker, CA Prateek Shah ji. He is a partner with a large firm with more than 19 years of experience in professional services and 2 years of corporate experience. He leads the integrated reporting practice and also works on sustainability assurance engagements. He has led financial reviews for non-governmental organizations and has deep knowledge and experience regarding the challenges faced by the corporates with regard to the CSR spend through implementing partners. So we welcome you, sir, to the session. Sir, you're not audible, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we are able to hear you now.
Okay. Thank you, Jyoti, for this introduction, and thank you, Payal, for the very practical insights that you shared. I think it's very important to now understand ESG, and it's not just about seeing how it is to be applied and have an impact, but the real life situations that we are seeing as a service provider to corporates or as an entity itself. What I'll do is I'll just take you through certain eye-opening points that I believe are really going to be important when you talk in terms of application of ESG in the real life world. Because as we now all know, almost every large regulator has got involved in this process, and the latest one we have the even the IASB coming up with the reporting standards board, and that's going to be a very important point in terms of how the application of this boils down to financial statements. Because unless an event can be quantified and can be put in a situation where people can understand and read the impacts of it, it may not be able to survive the message that has to be shared with them. But I think with that, I'll just put on my screen and then talk about the relevant aspect of it. Julie, you can just let me know once my screen is visible, then I can start talking.
Yeah, sir, your screen is visible.
Okay, is it there now?
Yes, sir, it is there.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some areas broken up into four essential parts. One is I'll talk about an external assurance. We have talked about this is full screen. Okay, so way I'm going to talk about it is I'm going to talk about in four sub points. One is the external assurance. This is something that we have talked about, but I want to bring out why it becomes important. I'm not going to talk about the every nuance of it, but some relevant aspects and which are the areas where people are looking at a very specific case in point to know why it's important. Second, I'll talk about some accounting impacts. As I said, eventually all of this will boil down into the financial statements, and then we'll have a classical number impact flowing to the balance sheet P&L and essentially the results of a company. And the way we are seeing things are becoming very, very agile and very, very turbulent in modern times. And the impact of it, somebody will have to be very, very mindful of which event could have an impact on them. Thirdly, I'll also talk about the auditing considerations. What are the important elements for us as professionals, as auditors, that we need to bring in to ensure that the report which is being finally issued covers the important aspects. And fourth, which is last but not the least, is embedding the controls and in technology. With that, I'll just move on the first point in terms of the need for external assurance. Now, when I talk about external assurance, it is the report is being issued by the company. But when you look at an ESG and sustainability or climate, I think all of them are very closely knit and subsets of each other in one form or the other. The report goes out to the shareholders and the stakeholders at large, something which is being embedded and imbibed by any corporation. And hence, having a external validation on the entire report becomes, to me, a very, very important part, because you as a management are then subscribing that this is something that we are giving. And a third independent party has also vetted this information and has provided their support over it. The essence is the increasing demand of ESG climate-related information is becoming very, very important. While there could be n number of things covered in the annual report, but the importance of the KPIs which are given is fairly large. Also, the amount of non-financial KPIs which are now covered is increasing beyond anybody's comprehension, and those are areas where a lot of judgments, insights are required to be given, and hence it could make a lot of sense if there are people who can subscribe to it in terms of what verification has been done, what are the basis they are verifying it, and then also bring in an element of what the entire industry practices. So that could be an important insight for management to take it forward. The third one is of course it was a report which was issued earlier, but now these reports have a very significant impact in terms of the decision making by the stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, it is much beyond shareholders. One of the recent trends that we are seeing, if we talk about millennials, right, the people who were born after 1990, the decisions they are taking in terms of joining any organization is much more driven by ESG, apart from any other factor. They want to be associated with companies that are very compliant and advanced in their contribution to the society at large, including the climate and ESG factors. And hence, it's just one of the stakeholders I'm talking about. This is now going to go to vendors, suppliers, and everybody. And hence, the condition of associating with somebody is going to become very important. Also, the absence of consistency in terms of reporting is something which is very important. If you keep the BRSR or the BRR out of the equation, the reports which are being used by corporates at large are so different and so varied that it becomes difficult for a stakeholder to actually read and compare. And hence, again, support by some third party could really help in terms of helping what the right KPI is and what the right non-financial information could be. This also could help by assisting the corporates in terms of what should be picked up as a KPI and what is the industry trend. So that's where I think the essence of external assurance becomes very, very important. Also, you cannot discount that this will require many specialists. As I said, it's not just financial KPIs we're talking about. We're talking about many non-financial KPIs. And hence, a single team, let's say, if you're talking about a statutory audit under the financial statements requirement, a team of accountants could do it. But can the same team finish assurance over a ESG report? The answer is fairly and clearly a no. You will require many other people and specialists to do this. And hence, that's again an important part that you need to cover in terms of considering why you need an external assurance. Third, and again, I bring this part because that's something that I'm dealing with on a regular basis. There are many financing arrangements. When you talk about green bonds, as an example, they are linked to certain ESG parameters being fulfilled over time by corporates, and then the coupon rate attached to it actually show a decline when you are able to better your ESG performance. Is this something that people are going to accept based on the value that the management gives? And the answer is absolutely not. Or I can go by saying that they would probably require somebody to verify this independently and give a comfort before giving some discount on the coupon rate. That's another area that we need to factor in when we talk about external assurance. Again, it's not something which is a point in time item. The commitments are over 3, 5, 10 years, and hence a continuous monitoring could also be required. So these are the three elements I wanted to bring out. Why would somebody need an external assurance, or corporates should start considering an external assurance? And that's for me a key in terms of providing value add to the stakeholders that you are listening to. Moving on that, I want to talk about some elements in terms of accounting impacts that ESG climate are going to have. Again, while there is no specific accounting standard as of now that has been called out, but numerous discussions are happening at varied body levels. You can talk it at FASB level or ISB levels. Even SEC has come up with some very specific guidance on that. So some of the areas I can talk about is, let's say, inventory. Now, as you all know, when we talk about inventory, the requirement in terms of the valuation is you have to compare the carrying value of the inventory with the NRV, or the net realizable value less cost to sell. Now, in today's market, there could be ample reasons for revisiting that. Because the climate has become so volatile, the effect on your inventory could change overnight, and hence that's something that needs to be factored in. So just an example, a couple of weeks back, Chennai had some torrid rainfalls and the entire city came to a halt. How is your inventory covered under this exposure? Has that been factored in? I think that's the element that the companies will have to bring in and factor in when they are doing the entire NRV analysis. Also, let's say everything remains favorable. There are no issues in terms of the climate change, but the change in legislation. Example, I'm just giving you a very rough example, but Let's say the government just comes out tomorrow that no plastic and plastic is completely banned. What happens to the water bottling companies? What happens to their stock? What happens to the beverage companies that are doing the bottling plants? How that is impacted? So these are the impacts that could come on an inventory. And then again, it's more about keeping eyes, ears open in terms of what event globally could impact the business of yours or of your clients. So that's when I talk in terms of inventory. When I talk about impairment, again, as you know, impairment is an activity which has to be done annually or when there are events for certain items. Now, with the change in global scenario over climate change, there are so many changes, so many decisions, so many commitments made by corporates and by countries on a standalone or a collective basis. This all had to be factored in. Let's say a company just says that I have a coal plant and then a coal electricity plant, and I'm going to change that over the next 5 years. The assessment of your impairment for the particular plant undergoes a change massively compared to what it was in the last year. As you know, for an impairment standpoint, we do a cash flow analysis over the next few years, how that will change, what could be the impact of the current regulations, what happens tomorrow if something new has been introduced. So that's where impairment is going to be. And again, as you know, impairment uses a lot of estimates and judgments. Disclosing those as a part of a financial statements is also going to be very important. Uh, Useful lives is again a very debatable topic when it comes to climate change. We have been historically using lives, and I don't know companies using their depreciation lives for years together, unless there's a statute that requires. We had something that changed the useful life in the Companies Act a few years back. But other than that, I don't know companies really putting a lot of efforts in scientifically come up with the useful life concept. Now, with this concept again of climate change and ESG, this is something that might come under limelight. The production process, the factories that are built in, the areas, the region that they could build in, there could be impacts in terms of global technology. Let's say somebody just scraps a technology that has been used, or I go a step beyond. Suppliers just refuse to buy your products if they are not using level grade machinery. Example, I talk about, let's say, AC plant in a particular factory. If that AC plant is not compliant, let's say, with what we call the 5-star technology, the vendors might refuse to connect with you. So those are the things that you will probably have to relook, factor in as an impairment or a depreciation in the useful life changes, and also accordingly make right the disclosures. Provision and contingent liabilities is another area that we have to be very, very careful of, because which regulation will require what amount of outflow is fluid as we speak. And as things are progressing, last 3 weeks with the COP discussions happening, we had some update almost every other day. So what commitment corporates are making, is it something which is explicit, implicit? Is it something which is driven by the board as a commitment? Those things will have to be disclosed and probably put in as a part of your P&L balance sheet as a provision to be taken a charge with, or maybe it could just come in as a disclosure in terms of your potential liabilities. So that's an area also that companies will have to be mindful of. Financial instruments, again, there are many aspects that could hit in, but again, I'll talk about few. One is, of course, in terms of the fair value measurements of our financial instruments, where we talk about bonds which are linked to some indexes, how those could fluctuate. Another example that comes to my mind is, let's say, talk about green bonds, right, where the bond coupon is agreed on day one, but it could come down as and when the ESG parameters are met. Now, the accounting impacts from an issuer standpoint and from a holder standpoint could be different. If we talk from a holder standpoint, will it be an amortized cost? If it's a bond with a fixed coupon, it could definitely meet the requirement of Ind AS 109 and get classified as an amortized cost. But if the coupon keeps on changing based on certain parameters met, will that condition be met? If not, will that become an FVTPL instrument? And when I say FVTPL, it's fair value to profit or loss. The implications on financial statements are huge. And I know banks are holding these bonds, and they are struggling with the accounting implications, because if it becomes an FVTPL, the volatility that comes up in the financial statements is much higher than what it could be for amortized cost. Correspondingly, from an issuer standpoint, if the financial instrument has a coupon which is going to reduce, how do you account for it? Is there a derivative which is embedded into the entire contract? Do you separate it out? Do you structure the entire contract as FVTPL? So these are the elements again from a financial instruments. As I said, the impact is going to be much higher for almost every financial instrument. The discount rate we use, on what basis it is used. So and then the last but not the least is the disclosure. The disclosures of financial instruments will have to factor this qualitative and quantitative impact and give a flavor of why we are doing so and what we are doing to make it transparent and legible for the users of the financial statements. There are some special considerations in terms of carbon credits, etc. We know that some years back, carbon credits pick up sale and purchase had become a very important element. There's a lot of discussion at that point in time. IASP had also come up with some basic papers around this, but there was no guidance which was very concrete. And people were either using it as inventory or as a part of their current assets. And then sale and purchase happened at the regular price which the market gave. But now with the ESG and climate change impact being very consistent, we expect more guidance to be given on this. Even the training on this particular credits and other type of emission rules will become very important. It's about how people are going to implement in the country level. So for me, when I look at elements like this, I look at it from a company level, I look at it from an industry level, I look at it from a regional government level, I look at it from a global level. Because just as an example, what if carbon credits are allowed to trade on a stock exchange? How do you value it? What will happen if these are allowed to trade between countries and between MNCs? So how do you account for it? What happens about the foreign currency deviation and the valuation? What happens to if there's not a common valuation platform? How do you pick it up? So there are many open questions which have to be addressed over this. But for me, it was 2 years back, I said yes, this is time to come. But for me, I believe this is a discussion which is ongoing, and we should expect some answer on this. These are some of the elements, but there could be many points in terms of the accounting impacts that could come in when we talk about ESG and climate. With that, let me just move to a element which is very close to the accounting impact, which is the auditing considerations. I don't think both of them, the accounting and auditing, could be really alienated from each other. They are very closely linked. But of course, the lens at which you will look at will be different. The accounting could be more from a company standpoint, and the external auditor or the internal auditor will have to vet what you are doing. But the auditing considerations are really going to be for the professionals like us. And how do we factor that into our businesses and the process that we are doing? As I said, we are now moving from a sample-based audit to a very process-based and control-based audit. So what are the controls around this? So starting, while I talk about the 6 points, one of the key elements for me is going to be understanding the entire governance process around climate and ESG from a corporation. What are the risk mitigation steps, right? There are risks which are expected, and there could be some which happens out of the blue with the recent changes that happen in climate. So what are the strategies around this? Are this area that need to be factored in when I'm doing my audit? The answer is definitely a large yes. So the first impact that I see is around estimates and judgments. We talked about many items in the first slide around impairment, around inventory valuation. These estimates and judgments are going to be very critical. A lot of thought process is going to get applied. And to add to it, it's not going to be a simple answer for most of the organizations. And again, using one scale for all entities may not be correct. So the second point, its use of experts, is probably linked here. Again, if I talk about an estimate in terms of useful life or the impairment, or even in terms of what happens when I talk about restoration commission obligations. So I will need to have a strong team, much more beyond accountants, to help me come up with an answer in terms of the number which I'm trying to validate has all open ends been tried to be tied, or are there loopholes that probably could make this very questionable. So that's the area where estimates, judgments, the disclosures around that, and the robustness of how it has been will depend, and an use of experts could be a very important part there. Going concern is an area which probably sounds very harsh, but it could impact certain businesses. As I said, right, there's a plastic manufacturing company, and for some reason somebody just stops the entire use of plastics in the world. What happens to their organization? What happens to power companies that are using the historical or the traditional methods to generate electricity? Because if their carbon emission levels are really unsustainable, there could be questions on how the government could allow or disallow such operations. So going concern becomes a very important part, and it's not just about um, uh, the laws and regulations around the world. What happens if there is a large climate catastrophe, and then the company is probably going through a very large amount of pain in terms of recuperating from it. With the climate changes, I don't think that's a very strange thing to happen now and or to imagine. So those things will have to be factored in when we as auditors are trying to look at a corporate and factor in these things when we issue the report. Uh, Climate change commitments, I think I talked about that in the provisions and contingent liability part. But the commitments again here are going to be very important because uh, if something has been just committed by the CEO at the global level, and then the repercussions could part in or flow down to the subsidiaries across the world. So the eyes, ears, information flow will have to be very, very strong on this because too many webinars and sessions are happening, and then companies are making commitments as part of their corporate governance or as their part of ESG policies. We'll have to keep an eye open for those, and at least we need to have a disclosure in terms of contingent commitments, if not a provision in the financial statements. Impact on accounting matters is far on the radar. As I said, the earlier slide was for companies, but we as auditors and whoever are doing the statutory audit will have to factor this on the accounting impact. As I said, it could be as simple as a change in a discounting rate that could come in, because if there are impacts in terms of ESG, the discount rate at which loans could be made available could be much more different than what happens in a normal situation. So, according to me, every aspect of your audit will have to have a figure or a covering process from an ESG or a climate change standpoint. The moment that happens, I think we'll have a complete audit documentation process which factors all the relevant aspects that need to be covered. The last box for me is an important one because this will now all set to become a continuous assessment process. And believe me, I think we are at a point of no return. If we further delay our, and this I'm talking not as professionals but as citizens of the world, if we delay our further steps as ESG compliant citizens, it's going to probably go south much faster than we can imagine. And this assessment will now be a very continuous one for businesses and for corporates and for all clients. And that's why having the right team on board is going to be very important when we talk about the audit considerations in terms of overall impact of ESG. Again, in the time I have, I've just tried to cover the tip of the iceberg. All of the sessions could be a matter of debate, could be a matter of significant discussion when we talk about it at length when it comes to. And again, the most important part is the impact, the considerations for every client will be different depending on their business, on the products, on the strategies, on the spread, on the regions they are based in. And hence, there may not be a one rule fit all concept applicable for this. Last but not the least, as I said, the topic I want to cover is about embedding this as a process and the technology. It will not make sense for corporates if this becomes a year-end exercise. Hence, a dashboard or a continuous MIS is something which is, to me, an important part of the process and something which is going to become a very essential part in the journey. Because it will not make sense to make a decision unless the ESG and parameters are kept in mind. I go back to the discussions I had on integrated reporting with my clients. And the concept of integrated thinking, which is embedded in the concept of integrated reporting, is you need to factor in the important elements of all other capital, that is social, environmental, financial, intellectual people on the decision that you make. To give an example, if you're talking about this 10 years back and you have to set up a plant, the questions in the boardroom were what will be the capacity, what will be the change in the annual sales, what will the gross margin that we add to the bottom line on this. But if you talk about the same question today, the questions are much more and beyond this. While you have the basic questions for sure, the question is, what is going to carbon emission? What loss are we going to make in terms of our climate impact? Are we going to deforest a forest around this? If yes, what is the alternative in this? Are we going to support the ecosystem of people and then the tribal people in the village if you're going to go to tier 2 tier cities? Are we looking at a local employment basis? what is going to be the plus point for our people? How are we going to support the vendors if the ecosystem around this is going to be really far and wide? So the questions are now much more and then are important in every decision that we are making. Unless, and that's why the reason I say, unless a continuous information on this is available, you may not be able to come up with the right decision parameters, and then that could be something that might require a rechange immediately. Second is use of systems to generate and collect data. That's again an important part in terms of the overall reporting, because while the report goes once in a year or twice a year, the system that is used to generate data is going to be very important. The reason I'm saying this is, if you talk about large corporates, and I'm talking about from my personal experience, if you talk about large corporates and who are spread across the length and breadth of the country, if not the world, the data which is provided by their different locations is very rarely consistent in terms of the gatheration model, the presentation model, and the concept model. So if that happens, you probably have a challenge in giving out one data source, because if the benchmark used is, so let's say one of the parameters is that we are on a scale of 80% to what our target was. Now 80% is fair enough. It is a number, but the base taken to come up with that 80% is different between unit 1 and unit 2. That becomes a very questionable data which is going out, and hence having consistency and using systems to generate and collect data is going to be very important. Only then you can send out data which is consistent, which is verifiable, and at the same time reliable for the stakeholders. This data will be used in the decision-making process, and hence again, it's important for the corporates to have a system which makes it very, very consistent. Accuracy and consistency of data is something I talked about, but that's an important point. Again, it applies more to large conglomerates, and there are houses which I know use good and systems which are efficient for gathering of data, but still this can go to another level. And how much automation, how much consistency can be added is the question that corporates have to answer before jumping on the overall process. Benchmarking with industry practices is going to be important. The reason being, you could put in a number. Let's say we are on a scale of 1 to 5, that's 4 for providing our ESG services. But how do you benchmark it? On what basis are you benchmarking? Are you doing what your peers are doing? Have you missed a relevant item? What are your materiality basis of selection of the right KPIs? And that again brings me to the last point in this, which is continuous rehashing and processes and controls, because this is an evolving area. Because there are going to be elements. Just a minute. Because there are going to be elements in terms of coming up with the right processes to have the right data and the right controls, not in just in terms of preventive, but also detective, that nothing wrong is missed out, because as I said, all of this will eventually have an impact in the financial statements. And if it is not factored the right moment, the risk of restatement is much higher, and hence that's not something that corporates would want to have. And then this are going to be very, very quintessential, if I may say so, for development of policy around ESG and ensuring the reporting is very consistent when that goes up. I think with that, that's the time I was allocated, and I've just open for some Q&A if you have time. And Jyoti, over to you if you want to moderate this session.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. There a very good perspective on what can be the accounting and auditing issues related to sustainability reporting. Have you stopped sharing the screen, sir?
Yeah, I'll just stop.
So we were talking about carbon credits. So we have got one question on carbon credits. A member has posted, carbon credits are a highly technical area covering the environment. What can be the role of a chartered accountant in the same, with special regards to financial impact and acceptance by various authorities? So, and how impactful will the reporting be like? As a chartered accountant, how they can estimate carbon credits? So I would like to request you to please give your views on this matter.
Definitely. Is the sharing, I think somebody removed the sharing I was doing, right? You can confirm?
Yeah, sharing has been removed. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, Jyoti, I covered this point when talking about the special considerations in the accounting section. As you know, carbon credits was an area a couple of years back when the trading was allowed and people used to sell the credits that they have, and people who were having excess emissions were buying the credits to make it bit carbon neutral in terms of the operations. IASP had come up with some guidance in terms of accounting for it, and most of the people accounted it as an inventory in their books. Of course, the cost for which was almost nil. But when the selling happened, people were used to were recording the sale and then having the gain or loss in respect to that. Today, again, there is not much guidance available, but to the question specifically, we as chartered accountants have definitely a role to play. This will be important in terms of having a right impact in your inventory balances or your balance sheet balances. Where we could play a role is identifying what are the processes implemented by corporates for ensuring the right amount is recorded in terms of carbon credits. Because again, this is a very, very specific area. While corporates factor in a lot of carbon credits in terms of the process, there are many areas where carbon is emitted but not being factored. First is going to be completeness. How are we ensuring that the complete carbon emission cycle is factored in? Right, because even use of plastic bottles in the room could lead to a part where we say that the emissions should factor. So I think from a controls process standpoint and completeness standpoint, CS will have a very important role. Second is in terms of doing the right valuation. And as I said, we'll need to bring in experts here because, or unless we equip ourselves with that additional qualifications to be masters in getting a qualification done. The valuation to be done for the carbon credit is going to be important because the way the accounting was suggested, it might have straight away impact on the bottom line every year because you will only sell it. There is no cost directly attributable for the acquisition of it or generation of it. And these are the two important areas in terms of where I believe CAs will have a very important role to play from a carbon credit standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. I think this area is evolving and more guidance will be keep on coming. And carbon credit is definitely very important. And as CAs, what we can do with regard to like defining the boundaries of materiality or defining what exactly the valuation should be done. These are very important aspects, and upskilling is very important. So like Sustainability Reporting Standard Board is taking a number of initiatives. And as the things are evolving, we are going to take up more initiatives in these areas and provide more guidance to our members.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, sir. With this, we come to end of our webinar. And on behalf of SRSB, I am thankful to all the faculties of the day and to all the participants who have taken time on a working day to join this webinar. And it is really heartwarming to see that we have around 1,000 members, 1,000 plus members who have joined this webinar on a working day. This shows how the sustainability is gaining importance. And we as professionals are recognizing that it is going to be more important over the years. So thank you so much. With this, we come to the end of the webinar.
Thank you, Jyoti, and thank you, everyone.